everywhere where there are indigenous peoples are living in a particular place. And in that place, they have lived and they have moved but arrived in all, multiple times through those spaces and have come to know a particular land and a particular place in their own way. They've come to learn from a particular place by their interaction in that particular ecology. And that ecology has given them a know-how, their ability to flourish in a particular place with their know-how, with their creativity, with the ancient stories and traditions of their own people. And that largely entails a depth of knowledge and understanding of a particular kind of place. At colonization, or the time at contact, we've had people who have arrived and displaced our indigenous peoples, not only in terms of their land, but displaced their knowledges and displaced their ways of knowing. Those are still present in the traditions of the people. They are still present in the way they have come to understand themselves, but that sometimes with the imposition of a colonial imperialistic education and language, they have had some erosion to those languages, some erosion to their knowledge, and erosion to that particular way of being. Since, the recognition of the Aboriginal and treaty rights in 1982, we have now a government and a peoples in Canada who have recognized that Aboriginal and treaty rights exist, and they exist in relation to Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples in Canada. And so it has some meaning to them in terms of how we exist together. Indigenous peoples then, or First Nations peoples in Canada, in these treaties have provisions for holding on to those things that they did not give up in land and in exchange for lands, in exchange for services or any of those kinds of things. And in those, they have a way of being that still is part of their how they understand themselves today and how they want to continue in the future. Indigenous education then is about how we can enable those kinds of learning from within their particular traditions that were holistic and lifelong and experiential and communally learned, ways in which embraced within their language and cultural traditions, as well as the things to which they have adopted and adapted since contact, and that those things are the frameworks for how they want to pass on to their children their own humanity, how they want to live in the future. A decolonized education then requires us as large peoples in Canada to understand the colonial history in which we've lived and the ways in which that imperial colonial system of superiority so have diminished our people's way of living so much that some have, and our youth, because they haven't learned from the elders, have got to a place where many of them are in a state of what we call nihilism or meaninglessness, and from which a lot of children are being lost. A decolonized education for me is about how we address those inequities, those inequalities, by coming to understand what are the strategies that have created notions of superiority and notions of inferiority, and that Canadians, teachers, teacher education can examine their own structures and how they have in the past, and they continue to contribute to those inequities and to correct them so that we can begin again to develop systems that respect equally both indigenous knowledges as well as respect, because we understand its value in some ways, a Western knowledge systems, but to understand that in Western knowledge systems, it's also embedded in ideologies of superiority, and that those kinds of things need to be unpacked in order for us to be able to address a more equitable systems that allow us to look at both indigenous knowledges as well as other diverse systems of knowledge.